Hello world and welcome to this edition of Tech on Fire with Blaze. Today we're going to be looking at Azure App Service Deployment Center and how you can use this for continuous integration and continuous deployment on apps. Today we're going to be looking at deployments in Azure App Services and how these integrate with continuous integration and continuous deployment. Continuous integration is the process of making small changes to code and constantly integrating those with the main branch of whatever my code may be. So I'm in this process going to be writing small changes to my software and then constantly merging those back and then running my tests and doing all that work on a rather tight iteration rather than doing this once every other week or even once every other month, rather doing it maybe even hourly or daily, depending on how quickly my integration and how quick my iterations go. And what this provides is smaller, more incremental changes to my code base rather than these large monolithic changes to my code base. Additionally, we can also do continuous deployments in a similar fashion. What continuous deployments do is take those small changes in continuous integration and runs them through the batch of tests that I might have in my pipeline, and then constantly puts those small changes into my production environment rather than having these rather large monolithic patches that I apply on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis, or maybe even a yearly basis. Rather, I'm constantly applying changes on a rather tight integral and maybe even every other week if that's how quickly I'm putting these changes into production. If you think about a piece of software like Google Chrome, most people don't even realize what version of Chrome they're on. That's because it doesn't really matter, because Chrome is using this process of continuous deployment where they apply small incremental changes to the software, and it does it in the background, and the user hardly ever even notices it. And with other software, you might have to go click a download button and then and close out the software and then apply a patch. With Chrome, you never have to do that. It's rather doing that in the background, and it's applying those continuous deployments to your instance of Chrome without you even realizing that it's happening. Apps can be deployed to Azure from many sources and many repositories. So what we can do with Azure App Services is hook it up to a number of different code sources that are generally Git-based, and then use App Services to build a continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline right in the service. So what that would look like is something like this, where I have my local copy that I'm working on and making my changes to. And say I get my changes done and they're satisfactory in my local copy, and I'm going to check that into my code repo. So I just create a copy of that in my code repo and move that over, and that gets merged in to my branches, and I run all the changes I need to in my code repo to make sure that that's a good thing. Maybe I'm doing pull request or something like that, and everything checks out there in my code repo, and that gets merged into the main branch. Now, once I get that into the main branch, what I can then do is go into Azure App Services and create an integration pipeline where it basically just takes that code out of that code repo and moves it into the staging slot. Now, with this staging slot, what I can do is I can actually tell App Services to build my code in that staging slot. So it's going to convert that code into a binary. And then with what we saw last time, you can do a swap, but with the Azure App Services, after the build happens, you can also tell it to automatically swap it with production, so that after that code gets built, you can just put it right into the production slot and everything is up and running. And then what's in the staging slot is now what was in production. So I could repeat this process, and then what was in staging, what was in production 2 versions ago, will get overwritten by what's in the code repository. But with this process, you can have rather robust pipelines built right into Azure App Services without having to use an integration service such as Azure DevOps. However, that is another story for another day that we're going to cover when we talk about app services and how you can integrate this with other features on Azure. I'm here in the Azure portal. I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up these integration pipelines using the tools that are available in App Services. So let me zoom in here a little bit on my browser so we can see what we're doing here. And I'm going to create a resource here. I'm just going to create a web app right here. And this web app is going to create an app service plan for me. So I'm going to select this app service resource group that I've already created, and then I'm going to put it into, give it a name. Let's call it Blaze Demo 2 or something like that, since I've already used that other one for another name. And I'm going to select the .NET Core runtime stack and use Windows for the hosting. And it's going to ask me to create an app service plan, which I can use here. A standard S1 should be fine. That allows me to have deployment slots, which is what I need for this particular demo that I'm doing. So with that in mind, I think I have everything that I have needed turned on. I'm not going to turn on application insights. We'll look at that in a future video. And then I'm not going to tag anything and go ahead and recreate this guy. And once this guy creates, we will come back and we can then set up some other functionality inside of the app service plan. Looks like my resources have been deployed, so let's go over here to my resources, and there is my app service that is running inside of this resource group, and I should have in the same resource group my app service plan right here. So I have an app service and an app service plan. So what I need to do now is set up some deployment slots for this particular app service here. So let's go ahead and come over here to deployment slots, and let's create a staging deployment slot for this particular app service here. I'm going to call this one staging, and I don't really need to clone any settings, but I can just go ahead and create that, and we'll come back when it's done. Okay, now that my staging slot is deployed, I have Blaze Demo 2 staging and Blaze Demo here. I'm going to swap over to this one, and now I can see that I'm not actually running anything in this. But what I can do is come over here to configuration, and part of the configuration you can do with an app service plan is set up an auto swap, and that's what I'm going to do here for my deployment slot here. I'm going to configure it to auto swap to production. And so that way, whenever I make a change to this particular deployment slot, it will automatically swap that change into production. So that's the first thing I need to do to integrate this one with my deployment pipeline. So the deployment pipeline is going to be fairly straightforward. So once that setting is changed, I can come over here to Deployment Center, and this is where I can set up all of my source code repositories and other types of things that I can do. So in this one, I'm going to be using GitHub for my demo, but I also have the ability to use manual development in syncs like with OneDrive, Dropbox, external FTP, but I'm going to use a source code repository. That way I could fake the continuous integration some for this demo, but I can use GitHub so that I can do source code management. Now, for this particular one, I'm going to pick a repo that I created specifically for this one out of this particular build, and I'm going to use an app service build for this one. I don't really need to pick this one because it's pretty much a static site, but if I wanted to use this build service, it would use Kudu, which is a set of advanced tools on app services that you can do things like set up files, get into the file system itself. You can run commands and all kinds of things inside of Kudu, and we'll look at that in a future video. But it's going to use Kudu in the background to do that. I can also integrate it with Azure pipelines here if I wanted to. Now, for the configuration, I'm going to select my personal repos here, and I'm going to select this app service demo, and I'm going to pick a branch, and it's master, since I only have one branch on this. If I had other branches on this same code repository, I could select that branch. And with that, I can click continue and then click finish, and then this will set up that deployment, automatic deployment to my staging slot from my source code repository. I'm now in my GitHub repo, and I'm looking at the index.html for my site, and I have it pulled up in this tab where it says I am Blaze Stewart, CEO of Microsoft. Well, I am not CEO of Microsoft. That was a mistake. So I'm going to say not CEO of Microsoft. The changes I want to make, I could change this to Satya Nadella or something along those lines. And I got the CEO mixed up, and I could say is CEO of Microsoft. Point is I'm changing the file, so I'm going to do an update and commit these changes to the master branch. Now, if all goes well, I should get an update back on my staging branch that should get pushed to my production branch. So let's go over here and take a look. So it did pick that up just a second ago. Did pick up that update.index.html. And so now this was what my production branch looked like before. If I push that and everything gets swapped, it should pick up those changes. Now it's loading, and I'm now seeing, I should be seeing the changes now that it's been swapped back into my production slot, and then my staging slot here should now have the changes that were in my production slot. So I can see there where it did make those changes. So that's going to wrap up our demo for today on App Services. Next time, we're going to be looking at more features on Azure App Services. So thanks for watching this episode of Tech on Fire with Blaze.
If you like this content, please consider visiting us online at www.wintellect.com, and there you can find about services that Wintellect offers, including training and consulting services. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel by clicking on the subscribe button and clicking the bell icon to get notifications when new content becomes available, and also comment down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at @TheOneMule, and also follow Wintellect on Twitter at WintellectNow or at Wintellect. We are constantly posting things about Azure-related technologies and things related to software development. You can also reach us by email at consulting@wintellect.com. Until next time, thank you.